over the long many years of your involvement in solidarity with People's Korea. Um, what have you noticed in has changed or developed in the response that you get from audiences like this in Britain?
Um, Unless someone else has one, is that a hand? No. Oh, sorry. I'd like to add another question to that. For all the years and decades of experience accumulated between you, so I guess this question is specifically to Dermot, to Hugh, and to Keith. What is the message you want to send to our young comrades here today and our comrades in the world on how we can be, better supporters of the revolutionary struggle in the DPRK, and what do you believe our mission is going forward?
I think as chair, Fiona, you should dictate which of the three of us answers first.
Okay, we'll start with Hugh, since you're first in the line.
Right.
Well, I'll take Peter's question, can I, in particular. What has changed over the years in the reaction and atmosphere of meetings such as this? Well, a lot has changed. When we first started holding meetings in solidarity with Korea and for study of the Juche idea, such a lot was different. There was still a section of the Labour Party who were friendly with socialist countries. The Korea Friendship Committee, of which I was secretary for 11 years or so, we had a panel of 6 or 7 members of parliament, happy to have their names as sponsors on our letterhead when we sent messages of greetings to Korea and so on. Nowadays, you can barely mention China on the left of the Labour Party anymore, can you? Maybe somebody very brave every so often, such as Diane Abbott, but basically the embers of solidarity with socialist countries within the Labour Party are barely flickering at all. So that's one change. Another change was that now it can be taken for granted, really, that there is a good fraternal relationship between different socialist and communist groups. They may have their disagreements, but looking around this room, I think we've got, the YCL, CBGB, we've got people who've had involvements with other Marxist-Leninist groups, and we've got Workers' Party of Britain joining us on the platform, and so on. In those days, there were tense relations between some of these parties, and actually the work that Keith and I were doing was pioneering bringing them together. They might not otherwise have even been in the same room, let alone happily talking as we are in a fraternal way today. So that's another change. Also, another thing that maybe can be developed now, I can't see any really reason why it shouldn't be, we did have international diplomatic recognition present. As Keith will remember all the embassies we had attending our events besides the Korean embassy. Can't remember them all. That's another thing that occurs to me. So basically, in a word, what has changed? Quite a lot. I'd just like to mention maybe one other thing, which is about the general conditions. I've said that we had things that affected the intensity of our involvement in anti-imperialist solidarity, and I mentioned the fact that we were closely working with the Irish Republican movement at a time of armed struggle. Actually, I think the threats of fascism and repression now are in ways more intense now than they were. It's ironic saying that. Those are the days of Thatcher. They were the days of fierce armed suppression of the Irish people and so on. but now I think Starmer's worse than Thatcher in some way. The constant libel that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, the constant libel. You can't get away from it. You can't turn on your radio onto BBC without hearing that and so on. So that, I think, we're facing very difficult situations in a way that I didn't actually experience even in those days.
Thank you, Hugh. Dermot, perhaps would you like to go next?
Yeah,
And Keith?
thank you for his very interesting contribution, I think, which could actually be developed a lot more, and we could perhaps spend all evening talking about it, but I'll try and confine myself to a few remarks. Am I answering your question as well, Fiona?
If you wish, yeah.
Okay, I'll answer that at the end. I mean, just following on from really what Hugh said, I mean, I think it is quite true. A lot has changed. Some things have got better, some things have got worse. I think the thing that's got a lot worse is the industrial scale demonisation of the DPRK, which is 24/7, almost every minute of the day. And you've got like the print media, broadcast media, the internet. And this is getting its way into people's consciousness. So, in the days when sort of Keith and Hugh, started the old Career Friendship Committee in the Mosquito Press and so on, the DPRK was one of 14 or 16 socialist countries. Now, a lot of them have gone, and the DPRK is very much number one target because, we're perhaps going to annoy one or two people here, but it is identifiably the most socialist country. So it gets intense demonisation to discredit it and smear it. And as I think as one or two people have said, there's a racial element to it as well. So that makes our work very difficult. And, with regard to the Labour left, well, the person who used to be our KFA organisation secretary years ago was was a constituent of Mr Corbyn, and he happened to encounter Jeremy Corbyn at a picket of the US Embassy against the blockade of Cuba. And he said, "Oh, it's very good, Jeremy, because he knew him personally. Very good, Jeremy, you're supporting Cuba. How about supporting the DPRK?" And Corbyn replied, "Oh, I've got concerns about human rights." End of conversation. So, I mean, that's the sort of thing we're up against. I think a positive is the internet. We're able to use the internet to spread the message, which what KFA is doing. And, I would just going to try and answer Peter's question, relate to recent... sorry about that, it's turned itself on. Two recent experiences in Liverpool and Wrexham, where KFA attended book fairs. Liverpool, absolutely brilliant, in the Casa bar in Liverpool, which is a working class pub, which is associated with the working class movement. I sold many books, had a big audience, like this one, gave great speech, everybody was listening, it went well. Wrexham, we got one or two hostile people, and then a week later an article in the Wrexham media saying that Wrexham Council wanted to ban KFA from Wrexham completely. So two different responses, which I think, shows you the sort of response we can get. But I think, if you address anti-imperialists, if you address those people who question the system, the response will be a good one. But we've got a very, very hard job to do. And in terms of what message can we give to young people, well, I say don't believe the propaganda of the mainstream media. Defend people's career with no ifs or buts. That's the slogan of KFA UK. And if possible, I know it's very expensive and very difficult, but please try to visit the DPRK yourself, because seeing once is better than hearing 1,000 times. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think because there were very, very good and interesting questions that have prompted already two very good and interesting answers, and there's a great deal that could be said about all this. I will try not to say a great deal on this occasion, but I think that actually, in terms of the history of building friendship and solidarity with the DPRK and the Korean people in this country, yes, from the time that Hugh and I formed the Korea Friendship Committee, but going back further to some other committees that existed, or even what happened at the time of the Fatherland Liberation War, would make a great project, a great book. But I know Hugh is certainly, for the stuff that we have access to, Hugh is doing a fantastic, amazing job of making building up an archive of these things, which I think will be a very valuable resource. I was struck by one thing that Dermot said when he said that things had got better and they got worse, and I agree with that. I agree with that assessment, and I think what we have to draw from that is in terms of how things started off to where we are today in this work, that it doesn't go in a straight line, and even if the overall trend is hopefully up, it's not gone. It goes with ups and downs and zigs and zags and detours, and some things are weaker and some things are stronger, and you have to make some assessment then of what the overall balance is. I think what Hugh said was and Dermot echoed, of course, was very important. With the Korea Friendship Committee, we had as you say, maybe half a dozen, maybe at times more, Labour MPs whose names were on the letter. One of them was Ernie Roberts, who was the predecessor of Diane Abbott in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. Ernie Roberts was the chair of the Korea Friendship Committee. Most, if not all, of these MPs had been to Korea, often more than once. They'd met President Kim Il-sung. They regarded him as a friend. President Kim Il-sung took them as his friends. And this, this is, we will still try to make inroads in those circles where we can, but this kind of situation doesn't exist anymore, and that's related to the fact, again, as has been mentioned, that it wasn't so much with those people that they had a particular orientation to Korea as such. In my view, they were pro-socialist, and there was a socialist camp of 14 countries and other countries in Africa and so on, trying to take the socialist road, where these people situated Korea as a natural part of that, and their friendship with Korea flowed from that. And I think that with the setbacks that we had with socialism on a world scale, that also, of course, impacted on the working class movement here and had a negative effect. And that very few people on the left of the Labour Party and the trade unions and so on had the strength to stand against that overall development in world politics. One of the few that did and has done is, of course, the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. But I think so that this the fact that one can't mobilise at present, one can't mobilise support even by and large, even from the left of the Labour Party in support of the DPRK, is also related to a much bigger political reconfiguration, which is essentially, although it, again, like any historical process, it's uneven, but it's essentially the collapse of social democracy as even a partial, limited, contradictory expression of working class political interests and working class demands, and out of that, the end product of that is something that you said, which I entirely agree with. That yes, Starmer is far worse than Thatcher. When Thatcher was around, we wouldn't have believed that was possible, but it is. Starmer is putting forward policies, implementing policies that Thatcher wouldn't have dared to do, including on the question of Israel. I might say there were times when Thatcher imposed an arms embargo on Israel, believe it or not. So that's something where we're weaker. But there's another trend which, and Lenin famously spoke about going lower and deeper to the real masses. I think for all the strength we had in the early days with the Korea Friendship Committee, on some level, like a relatively good position with the Labour left, we couldn't have pulled together an audience like this one today, even though we brought together people who were very active politically with liberation movements and embassies and so on. But I think that for a more broadly anti-imperialist, anti-racist constituency, even though we were getting support from Labour MPs, you try to talk to other people in the movement about the DPRK and they would think you were talking about Mars or Pluto or something. And I'm not saying that that's changed entirely. Unfortunately, it clearly hasn't. But it is in the process of change. That it is there are an increasing number of people involved in anti-imperialist politics who are at least open to hearing the case for the DPRK, and many of them are, expressing an interest. And I think what's particularly driving that at the moment, like so many other things, is what's happening in Gaza, the genocide, and also the incredible resistance and heroism of the Palestinian people. Now, obviously, the Palestinian people have paid and are paying an unbelievably cruel and painful price for this. But it is creating, I believe that what's happening in Gaza and around it is a turning point in world politics, and not least in the court of public opinion, because everybody, it's not the first genocide in history, but it's the first genocide that every one of us can watch live on our smartphones, and the fact that millions of people, week after week, for 2 years, have demonstrated in this country and around the world in solidarity with the Palestinian people, and not just the huge demonstrations in central London, as important and vital as they are, but in not only every city, but in towns, in small villages, in places where there have never been protests. There are protests and various forms of solidarity in whatever way people can feel able, and every one of those ways is valuable. And what it is, just with this genocide being live streamed on our phones, it is just so undeniable to people that the reality that they know and see is happening is so completely at variance with what the government and the mass media and so on are saying, to the extent that the only response that the government can make is to arrest people in their 80s and 90s in wheelchairs who are blind and so on, who are sitting peacefully with seven word placards, and so
sorry, Keith, could I ask you to wrap up
Yeah.
on this contribution? Thank you.
Sorry, yes. So what I would say is that there is this trend that people say, well, if we're lied to on that, are we being, why should we think that we're being told the truth on other things, including the DPRK? And in the case of the DPRK, it's small beginnings, but it's positive. And so, message to young people then, don't make some of the stupid mistakes that we've done over the years, and be, as Dermot said, go to Korea if you possibly can. I think it would be great to organise delegations going forward as we're coming out of the global health crisis, and to not to be downhearted or dissuaded because you feel such powerful forces are ranged against you, because the example of Korea, just like the example of Palestine today, is that people can triumph over almost incomparably difficult odds. Sorry, I went on too long.
That's all right. Thank you, Keith. Now, unfortunately, we are out of time for further questions, but before we close up, as I'm aware it's 4, please forgive us, Marx Memorial Library. I'd like to take any final thoughts from Ossian and Peter, as I'm aware you haven't had a chance to speak in this segment.
No, I mean, the segment was largely prompted by my desire to hear about the trajectory of people's response to Korean solidarity over the years. As a relatively young man, still at the age of 39 for another few days, it's interesting to learn from those who have spent so long in such a worthy struggle. And I think really what I noticed inevitably from each of the responses from Keith and Hugh and Dermot was that there had been development in certain areas and decline or issues emerging in others, such as always the case, of course, but it is fascinating and I think valuable for those of us who are even younger than me, the younger generation, to see where things have come from, in order to try and figure where things are going to go. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Peter. And Ossian?
I think a lot of what I would say has been said by our other speakers, but I think, come back to the topic of my talk, I think it's especially important that we bring new young people, at fear of blowing my own horn a bit, but new young people into the anti-imperialist and pro-Korea movement. Hopefully I'll get to Korea myself at some point. I think it's especially important that we expand the movement to go down to the masses, as Lenin said, and to bring as Kim Il-sung said, the people that are open to the new, that are in touch with the current state of Britain and of the world, into our movement, into the socialist movement and into the anti-imperialist movement. Long live Korea.